Okay, and now we are recording. So, and Mojca, I will take again my presenter privilege for the time being. And I go back to the slides here. Now, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 7th session of this webinar program organized under the European Master in Official Statistics. Today we meet again Mojca Bavdaž from the University of Ljubljana. She kicked off this webinar series talking about response burden in February. Today she will focus on visualization. Mojca is assistant professor and a coordinator of official statistics modules at the Ljubljana University and also a member of the EMOS board. Now to your host, my name is Heli Lehtimäki and I did not put my webcam on so we don't mess up that of Mojca. And I work with EMOS in Eurostat. For those of you who are not familiar with the WebEx tool, let me go on a little bit here to tell you a few basics about it. So as usual, all participants are muted and you can interact in the chat box. If this is not visible, click on the chat icon on top of your screen. When active, the icon is blue. You can customize your view individually by swapping between the normal meeting room and the full screen view. You do this by clicking on top of your presentation window, as you can see on the screen. When you are on the full screen mode, your control panel is visible when you hover with your mouse on top of your screen. Make sure that your chat box is blue and active, because when you change the views, they tend to become inactive and gray. So to come back to the initial view, you click on the return button. Finally, if you wonder about gray boxes in your full screen view, those are the panels that the presenter is using, such as webcam and chat box. You can maybe customize them a little bit, but there is nothing much you can do about it. And now I stop bothering you with technical details. It is time to start. And we make, how did we make again, Mojca as a presenter? Let me see. The green box should go to Mojca if I happen to master this again. We say that she's a presenter. And there you go. Mojca, floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Just a second that we share the screen. And I hope, yes, maybe. Well, we can leave now the chat off and that was it. Okay. So hi everybody. I hope you can hear me well. The aim of this webinar is to provide an overview of foundations and challenges of good visualization. We'll first We'll first have a look at some classic examples of visualization. Then we'll cover the basics of visual processing. So we'll look at how our brain processes what we see. We'll then speak about the ways to visually represent data and if these ways are well perceived. And finally, we'll turn to visualization in official statistics. In the third part of this webinar, we'll welcome Jorge Camões from Portugal, Lisbon. He's a statistician that became an expert in data visualization. He's a data consultant and trainer. He wrote Data at Work on data visualization for business and non-designer users. And he also writes about data visualization on his blog, excelcharts.com. Now, I can add that he's a master of spreadsheets that know how to convince Microsoft Excel to show nearly whatever you imagine. Now, if you are new to this field, data visualization, I'm sure that after today's webinar, you'll recognize the importance of good visuals and understand implications of visual processing and perception for visual design. And I hope you will start looking at graphics from a totally different, let's say, more critical perspective. Okay, I'll start with the most common charts of our time, bar charts and line charts. And the person that is generally acknowledged as the inventor of modern bar charts and time chart series line charts is a Scottish political economist, William Playfair. He used these charts to display empirical, mainly economic data. And we have here one of his examples. In this one, he showed 3 time series for about 250 years. On top, we can see the reigns of British kings and queens. In the middle, a bar chart for the price of the quarter of wheat. And on the bottom, a line graph of a typical weekly wage for a craftsman. Now, essential elements of Playfair's graphics are still in use today. You have a descriptive title, you have labeled axis, you have a grid with major and minor divisions, you have color coding and shading of bars and lines. Now, even if this graphic is a classic, it actually goes against the first principle of good visualization, and that is start with a question. So what do you want to tell with a specific visualization? And then only select the right indicator and the right chart. Why am I saying this? Because Playfair used this chart to show that wheat, so presented here in the middle, got very cheap compared to wages. But this chart doesn't really show that directly. It shows that the wages below increased throughout the period, while prices, wheat price, varied a lot. So a much better way to visualize his message would be to plot a time series of a ratio, price per wage, for instance, or use a scatter plot of wage versus price. But both of these 2 ideas were unknown back in 1821. Now, we owe also this next classic to William Playfair. It's a pie chart. A chart that shows parts of a whole. And here in our example, and it's Playfair's example from 1801, we have Turkish Empire, and he shows the proportions of the empire located in Asia, Europe, and Africa. Now, pie charts are very controversial. They have serious shortcomings, especially. They take up lots of space for very, very few figures. Now, here, actually, Playfair is presenting just 2 figures, as the third one can be derived, okay? So it's a chart with very low data density. Now, the second problem is that comparing the size of slices is extremely difficult. Maybe not so much in this case when we have a really nice quarter, but still. And Edward Tufte, one of the pioneers of data visualization, said that the only worse design than a pie chart is several of them. But still, people like them, and they are really found everywhere. Okay, the next classic is a disease dot map. It's plotted by John Snow, who was investigating an outbreak of cholera in London. On this map, every dot represents a death from cholera in central London in September 1854, and every cross is a water pump. Now, if you look at these deaths, these dots, you can see how they concentrate around Broad Street. Now, he theorized that the water from this pump here was contaminated, and he lobbied to have the pump handle removed so that people could not drink this water. And it turned out that he was right. And this contributed to stopping the epidemic in the neighborhood. Now, it's thus a very good example how to visually think with maps and how this can lead to important discoveries and decisions. Now, the next classic is a polar area diagram by Florence Nightingale. Well, she took care of British casualties in Crimean War in the mid-1850s, and she recorded the causes of mortality for all dead soldiers, and then, well, she collected the data in tables as well. It was usual at that time, but then she displayed this data in a polar area diagram. Now, the polar area diagram is a kind of a pie chart. It's divided into 12 equal slices for 12 months of a year. And in her displays, she used red color to show deaths from wounds in battle. Black color shows the deaths from accidents and other causes. And blue, the most pervasive color here, is a color for preventable disease. Now, her graphics were striking. So the real enemy was not Russians, so it was not war. It was disastrous sanitary condition of the army. And she used these graphics for persuading people of the need for change. And this triggered improvement of sanitary conditions. And this was one of the milestones, we can say. Now, also, our next classic relates to war. It's a flow map by Charles Minard, a French engineer, showing Napoleon's devastating march on Moscow. And this graphic is notable for its representation of 6 types of data in just 2 dimensions. So he showed the direction of travel with this brownish band towards Moscow and the black band for the retreat. The second thing is we have the number of Napoleon troops. So the band width shows that, and we also have some labels showing that at the beginning he started off with 422,000 people, and just 100,000 reached Moscow, and 10,000 came back. The third variable is the temperature on specific dates in connection with the retreat. Okay, so we have the temperature and the dates. And you can also connect the location to specific dates. And of course, this is a map, so you have the location anyway and the distance. And the last classic is Henry Beck's London Underground map. And it's special because it favors usability over accurate geographical representation. Beck showed routes only with vertical, horizontal, and 45-degree angled lines. And he located stations according to available space, and which did not necessarily coincide with real geographical location. So again, we turn to the first principle. What's the question? What's the purpose of this display? And here the purpose is to determine how to get from point A to point B, and this map supports this task with excellence, even if it sacrifices, let's say, geographical accuracy for this reason. Now, you have a long list of other contributions, and I invite you to check this reference below milestones in the history of thematic cartography, statistical graphics, and data visualization to explore them yourself. And now we are moving to the basics of visual processing. Now, good graphics take advantage of how our brain processes visual information. We're exposed to so many stimuli from the environment. Now, imagine yourself walking down the street or browsing through a web page, scrolling through a report filled with charts. You visually sense so many things. Now, psychologists say that sensory input is entering into your sensory memory. Now, sensory memory that deals with visual input is called iconic memory. It has a large capacity for brief retention of visual information. And when we say brief, we really mean a split of a second. There is no conscious processing performed, but some pre-conscious, pre-attentive processing does occur, and visualization can take advantage of that. Now, part of our information that got into iconic memory gets our attention and is then conveyed to our working memory. Well, anything else is forgotten, okay? Working memory has a problem, has a limited capacity. So sensory memory with large capacity, working memory with a very limited capacity. We can actually only hold up to 9 chunks of visual information at a time for analysis. Now, this information in working memory is forgotten after about half a minute without rehearsal. So, if rehearsed, of course, the information can be moved into the long-term memory, and then long-term memory is relatively permanent and also unlimited in capacity, and from long-term memory you can recall the information back into the working memory when necessary. Now, the key issue with working memory is what constitutes a chunk of visual information. Now, let's take the example of chocolate, okay? If I can only take 9 chunks of chocolate, well, I will take care that those chunks are big, okay? And the same goes for working memory. You want to have chunks that are big, that have lots of information. Now, if you organize or group several visual elements into a single chunk, that gives you additional capacity. So if you see 9 separate visual elements, you already used all your working memory. But if you group them into a single chunk, then you have place for 8 more. Now, so if we go now back to this sensory memory or iconic memory for visual information. What do we process pre-consciously, pre-attentively? Actually 4 things: color, form, spatial position, and motion. We immediately see color. And at this point, I'll only introduce 3 color attributes. So a bit of terminology. Hue, as you can see here, is what we normally think of as color, like red, green, blue, okay? And colors are here positioned around the color wheel. Value measures the degree to which any hue appears dark or light. So ranging from fully dark to fully light. Well, you will find similar expressions, similar concepts of lightness or brightness, maybe in some literature. And then we have chroma, which is similar to saturation, and it measures the degree to which a particular hue exhibits its full, pure essence. And just to give you an example, think of the red color, and imagine fire engine red color. Okay, fire engine red color has high chroma. Okay, and then if you think of brick red, well, that's kind of, middle chroma, and then we end up with gray, which has very low chroma. Now, one of the interesting but hardly intuitive things about color is that we really don't perceive color in an absolute way, and what we see is actually dramatically influenced by the context that surrounds us. But although this is very fascinating field, we don't have the time to go into this. But our guest, Georges Camões, has prepared some tips on the use of color in data visualization, and we'll cover that in the third part of the webinar. Okay. Now, before I move to the next slide, I'll introduce the next group of pre-attentive attributes, and that is form. Now, we'll play a short game, a quick game. The game will be find the intruder, or find the different element. And I'll show you in a very rapid sequence 9 examples, and you do your best to find the different element. Okay? So you just, I want you to visually identify that different thing. So, ready? Let's go. Okay, these 9 examples. And let us all now prepare the chat window, because I want you to give me some feedback. Tell me, did you manage to follow me? Was it too fast? Or so did you manage to spot the intruder, the difference? Can you write that down in the chat?
And remember that your chat box is on top of your screen. You have to have the icon clicked blue.
Yes, I'm showing this. Probably you should see that. So were you able, when I was clicking through, and maybe I can repeat that. Now I think of it once more.
And make sure when you reply to the chat that you send it to everyone, because I sometimes see here chats that are privately to the host or to the presenter maybe, but it would be better if everybody sees.
It's the top option.
Yeah.
Everyone. Okay. So some people spotted more easily some of the forms. Okay, others maybe, somebody it was easy. Okay, the idea of this, thank you for those that replied. The idea of this pre-attentive attribute is that, you don't really have to think about it very much. You, in general, just see it. So maybe in some cases it's a bit more easier, but the idea is that you can make that quite easy, because it's how our brain is working. And how do we use this in data visualization? Now, if you want to highlight something, well, use a thick line, use bold text, use italics, add a mark. If you want to differentiate, take a different shape. If you want to visually rank, take different sizes, and so on. So I'm not showing here all all possibilities that you can choose from, but to give you an idea that there are many options how to help process your visualization. Now, pre-attentive attributes also concern spatial positioning. We immediately spot the horizontal and vertical dimension, or where this, let's say, specific point is in relation to the two axes. And spatial positioning, of course, is very essential to data visualization, as this is the most common way how we encode quantitative information. And if I play a little bit around here, I'm sure you notice immediately that I'm moving the mouse around, so you don't have to think to follow the mouse movement. And now what hits our eyes are variously colored individual points, and we somehow group them in objects. Okay, so this is very technical. What falls on our eye is actually just, a very big group of individual points, and we actually see specific objects. And how do we know that this is an object? How do we accomplish this? Well, Gestalt psychologists identified principles that explain how this sensory perceptual input is organized into groups. And let's take an example. What you see here on the left is a group of dots. Okay, and I would like some feedback from you now. So in the chat, if you have it ready, so you get it ready here. I will now move and show you something on the right side, and you just please tell me, we can wait just for 1 or 2 answers, what you see on the right. Okay? So what you see on the right? Okay, 3 bars, 3 columns. Very good, thank you. So the idea is you still have, the same number of dots, but as this, some dots are placed physically closer, you take them as a group, and this is the principle of proximity. Now, how is this useful in data visualization? Well, for example, there's no need for borders between columns in tables with statistical data. But this is something that is often the default version. Or you can, follow a certain path suggested by proximity, for instance. So there was no, you just see it again. Now I have another question for you. Now, what do you see here? Can you write in the chat, what do you see now? Yes, you see 6 rows. Very good, thank you. Or, yeah, layers, yeah. 3 dark horizontal lines stand out, yes. So it's a way of highlighting something. But everybody sees something horizontal, nothing in columns. How did we accomplish that? Well, using color, but we could be using something else, shape, size, orientation, and other visual characteristics. So this is the similarity principle. And how is it useful in data visualization? Well, there's also, let's say, no need for horizontal lines in tables. Let's say if you put your total in bold text, there's no need for a line, and so on. Of course, using the same color means that all these things that have the same color belong to the same group. And this also means that you should not then use the same color for different purposes. Okay? Okay. And another question. What do you see next? Okay. Okay. Most answers, thank you. Most answers are circle and a rectangle. And this is really what we tend to see. Of course, somebody at the beginning said that it's not complete, incomplete shapes. Yes. I'm not sure if you're new to data visualization. Because, yeah, we tend to, actually, we don't have full circle and we don't have a full rectangle. We have gaps there, but actually we tend to ignore gaps and complete contour lines, and we prefer to see these shapes as a whole. Yes. So this is the closure principle. So what's the application to the visual design? It's that there is not really the need to put a line, let's say, around a chart or a shaded background to define space and separate it from the rest. So the chart itself, the data will be connected together if there is, let's say, some white space around. Okay, and now our last example. We have here this example partly replicates what we already saw. We saw before 3 columns. So does this change when we, let's say, put 2 rectangles around the dots? Do you still see 3 columns? Yeah, well, definitely it's something different. It's not the same message anymore. Yeah. So yeah, you might see 2 groups, you might see 4. It's not completely clear, but definitely not just 3 columns as we saw before. And if I give you another example, yes, 2 main groups maybe, and 2 minor groups would be the best description of this. Thank you. And similar to this example to the right, so before we had just a group of dots, and now we have a column shaded. And so this is the enclosure principle that says that elements tend to be grouped together if they are located within the same closed region, or so if they are enclosed with a line or have another visual border, like here the shaded background. You just tend to put that together. Okay. Now this, what do you see here? Okay, 2 columns. Yes, this is what we generally see, and it's based on proximity. Yes, thank you. So these are close together and these are close together, so they form 2 columns. Now, what if I change them this way? What do you see? Yes, now we change from 2 columns to 3 rows. Yes, because connectedness is stronger than proximity. And here? Yes, still 3 rows. Okay? If there were no lines here, we would see 2 columns because, the squares would go together and the circles would go together. So the principle of similarity. But as we have this connection, we then go to we change into rows. Okay. And one more example that complicates things a bit. Do you still see 3 rows? Okay, first column seems dominant. Yes. Actually, most people would say that this enclosure is something that is stronger even than connectedness. Okay, so elements tend to be grouped together if they are physically connected, but enclosure may override also this. Okay, and now we go to a bit different question. And my question is, if we start at A, where does this line, imaginary line, go from A? Okay, 3 people agree that's 4, that they go to B. Okay, even if I use, let's say, a line. Okay, most people say B, yes. Okay, so we tend to see the line go from A to B. So not that it stops at X, and it's a bit difficult that, it makes a turn, goes to C, but mostly we see this, A going to B. And what, of course, here in this last display, we enhanced this line with color, so, by similarity principle. And we can see that color can interfere with the principle of continuity. So, as is displayed in this panel. So the principle of continuity says that elements are perceived as a whole if they follow a direction. And actually, this is very important in line graphs, okay? Because lines tend to cross, and it's important that you know where they are going. And now I have a bit different question, again for you. I will show you again a picture, and you try to tell me how many components do you see and what are those components, okay? Now here is the picture. What do you see? How many components and what are they? Okay, somebody said 2 lines. Okay, yes, 2 components, everybody agree. Something horizontal, straight, yes. A curve, yes. Wavy, okay. We tend to see similar things, okay? Yes, so nobody saw 4 parts? Yeah, nobody saw 4 parts? No? Well, this is what we probably saw. Everybody saw this? And you, of course, could have 2 other decompositions, at least 2. No, so nobody saw this one. Okay, even these 2 parts are very close together. So if we kind of used the principle of proximity, and nobody even, saw this pattern. Okay. Now, before explaining this, I'll show you one more example. So it will be the same question. How many components do you see and what are these components, but just a different design. So what do you see here? And you can use your imagination to describe this. Okay, very good. Sun over a tower, yes. Okay, 2 lines. Okay, sun on top of a castle. Okay, if you're... Oh, somebody's seeing 4 components. Okay, but you're talking to me privately. So 3 components: castle and trees. Okay. Well, yeah, most people would agree with those, you know, fairy tale decomposition into a into a sun, or, you know, maybe you're more technical and saw a circular saw blade, I don't know. And maybe somebody is here that still played the snake game and maybe saw that one. But, you know, you got the idea. So most people would see what we enhanced here in the display B. But it's interesting that these 2 displays actually, or how we see them, violate the continuity principle. Because if the continuity principle would be the dominating one, we should see this one, because the line continues this way, the line continues this way. And of course, one of you mentioned, okay, there are actually 4 components. Of course, this is a, let's say, common point, and actually 4 things, 4 lines are coming into this this point. Now, yes, and we got another good. If we take in consideration I'm reading the chat. If we take in consideration the intersection point, we have 4 lines. Yes, very good. So, but this is not the way that most people would see it, and we can take advantage of that if we have general public in front of us. And this principle is the principle of good form, or the law of good form, or good gestalt. And it says that, let's say, if I simplify it a little bit, is that the global form takes precedence over local reactions. So it doesn't really matter how this, you know, these 2 elements, well, these elements touch here. If this is one good simple pattern and this is another pattern, then we will see them first, regardless of, you know, this connection. Okay, yes, somebody says, I have actually seen C. Yes. Okay, so we have to be careful, okay? We have to test if this is really an example of a good gestalt, a good form, or is it just, you know, we imagined that it was a good gestalt. Okay. Now, do we need to stretch your legs? Take a sip of water, just a minute to continue. Okay. We'll now move into the visual representation of statistical data and perception. So how do we visually represent data? What elements do we have at our disposal to display data? Well, Jacques Bertin, a French cartographer, published a comprehensive theory of graphical symbols, and he defined 3 visual units: point, line, and area. And of course, well, we can add more things if we think of computational display that is offering a 3D space. So we could also add a surface and a volume. But let's keep it simple because we are about the basics today. How can you vary these visual units, these marks? Bertin said that marks can be varied in different ways. He called that different visual variables, by where we place them, so by position, or by their visual characteristics such as size, shape, color, brightness, orientation, and granularity. And later on, other visual variables were added to Bertin's list, and for instance, distinguishing between hue and saturation, that was not previously the case, adding resolution, crispness, transparency. And again, here we have motion, so when we think of a computational display. Now, we mentioned motion also as a pre-attentive attribute and now as a visual variable. And I have to mention that a person that really knew how to take advantage of motion in data visualization was Hans Rosling. And just in case this is the first time you hear about this Swedish professor, have a look, for instance, at his TED Talk that has already been viewed 11 million times, and observe how he uses the moving bubble chart, how he makes a story and also drama out of data. So you also find this moving bubble chart in as one of the milestones if you're going to explore that link that I mentioned before. Now, not all visual variables are equally successful in communicating with our visual system. For instance, Weber found out that if the difference between two lines is relatively large, then it's easy to detect, and if it's small, it's hard to detect. And the absolute difference doesn't really matter. Now, if you think of half a centimeter and think of a 2 centimeter long line and 2.5 centimeter long line, so the second line is 25% longer. This is the difference that you will be able to spot quite easily. Now think of 100 centimeters and then the second line 100.5 centimeters long. Well, this is just 0.5% longer, and it will be very difficult to detect. So they would look pretty much the same. And we have to be aware that when we have such small differences, our charts are not really telling much. Then Stevens estimated bias in judgments, and his results show that when comparing the length of two lines, the perceived length is quite similar to the true length, and the bias is small or non-existent. Well, when you compare two areas, well, bias is already present because we tend to, large areas tend to appear smaller than they actually are, and bias gets even worse when comparing volume. So comparisons of area and especially volume should be avoided whenever possible. And then Cleveland investigated how good we are at visual decoding of a quantitative variable. And he determined that we are best at decoding a numerical value that a specific position bears by judging the vertical distance from the bottom baseline. And our perception is also quite accurate when it comes to judging length. But we are worse and worse as we move down this list. Let's say if we want to decode a numerical value from an angle, slope, area, volume, or color. And now I have a next test for you. You don't have to tell me anything, just in case you're not holding a pen already, prepare one. I'll show you 3 pie charts. And I want you to order the slices of each pie chart from the largest to the smallest. Okay? So I'll give you just, about 10 seconds to do that. So be fast. So rank for each chart slices from maximum to minimum. Okay. Now you can check if you got them right. I hope that you now understand that the same task becomes trivial when you have bar charts. You simply see ranking in a bar chart because length is one of pre-attentive attributes of form. And the comparison in a pie chart becomes even harder or even misleading when the chart is distorted by 3D effects. And if you want a famous example of that, just Google pie chart and Steve Jobs and you'll find one. Now, you might consider switching from pie charts to bar charts. But to tell the whole truth, we do lose something when you go from this presentation to this one. Well, the main advantage of a pie chart is that we intuitively know that we deal with 100% divided in parts. And among bar charts, only a stacked bar chart would suggest the same, but in a somewhat less intuitive manner. Now, whichever graphics you use to present your data, it's good to follow principles promoted by Edward Tufte. So above all else, show the data. This is the fundamental principle that governs the others. So how can you achieve that you'll be mainly showing the data? Well, he's got a formula for you: maximize data ink ratio. So maximize data ink as part of total ink. And he defines this ratio as the share of ink devoted to non-redundant display of data information, or 1 minus share of ink that can be erased without loss of data information. So what exactly could we or should we erase without the loss of information? What can we delete? Well, we can first delete non-data ink, and this is the ink that doesn't represent data and creates clutter in a graphic. And we could also erase redundant data ink. And we speak about redundant data ink when more than one graphical element is used to display the same data information. And Tufte calls graphs with too much of these two, too much of non-data and redundant data ink, chart junk. Now, to illustrate these ideas, I did a very simple exercise. I was working on this presentation in Microsoft PowerPoint 2016. I used the command insert chart. I chose column chart and clustered column, and this is what I top left is what I got as a default. And then I chose 3 built-in styles. Now, let's first try to find some non-data ink. The, let's say, most impressive non-data ink is this black background. So there is lots of ink used for no data at all. And there are then, let's say, less visible things or less prominent things, as grid lines here or here, and we can also say that axes don't really have data and so on. Now, when Tufte suggests erase non-data ink, he also adds within reason. Now, some non-data ink can be used because it supports data information. For example, well, I don't have really any good example here, but we can sometimes see charts that really have a strong grid line, not a muted one as here, and these are chart junk. But let's say maybe just a few grid lines may help in understanding the graph better. Or instead of having really explicit grid lines, if I move back to this display, you can see that you can have actually white grid lines and erase color where grid lines would have been. Now, if we try to find some redundant data ink, well, a bar let's say a bar, is a great example of redundant data ink. It takes lots of ink to draw a bar. And the question is, why actually do we need a bar when I could have displayed the same value with just a single dot at the top of the bar? Okay, so just to understand the idea. Now, what can be worse than a bar? Well, to have a label bar, because then the label on top of the bar is telling you the same thing with its value and its position, but you already know that from the bar itself. Of course, these are principles, and they should be used within reason, and as Tufte says, revise and edit. So it's important to try and test several possibilities to find a right balance between different types of ink. Now, one last thing that I want to say in this part is about graphical integrative. We already mentioned perceptual difficulties we have with some graphical representations, and these may pose threats to graphical integrity. Now, to defeat graphical distortion and ambiguity, Tufte suggests clear, detailed, thorough labeling, explanations of the data on the graphic itself so that it's self-explanatory and so on. And he also introduces an interesting concept, the lie factor. And we should aim for the lie factor of 1, so that the size of effect shown in the graphics is the same as the size of effect in data, so that the visual image really represents the underlying numbers well. Now, as an example, consider this pictogram and compare A to B. If judging by height, B is 3 times higher than A, but the area is not only 3 times larger, that would be 3 times larger. It's about 9 times larger. And with the popularity of infographics, such distortions are likely to happen. So pay special attention to appropriate scaling of your design. Now, another good candidate for a big lie factor is a chart with truncated y-axis. If we compare the first and the third column, we get the impression that the last column is more than double the first column, while a closer look at the y-axis reveals relatively small changes. And this is the story that we get from non-truncated axis. Of course, we said that such small relative differences are hard to detect. So we might still decide for the last graphic, but let's say try to improve it by using visually prominent break in the y-axis. Okay, and now to the role of visualization in official statistics. When we think about visualization, we typically think of dissemination. Visualization is not mentioned explicitly in the European Statistics Code of Practice in any principle, but Principle 15 on accessibility and clarity states that European statistics are presented in a clear and understandable form. And there is an indicator that specifies that the form should facilitate proper interpretation and meaningful comparison. Now, I'm showing you here the generic statistical business process model, just as a quick reminder of all processes of statistics production, so that you won't consider visualization only a part of dissemination that we have here, but part of many other internal processes and analysis. For instance, visualization is an important topic in survey methodology. That's also, let's say, where I encountered this. Jenkins and Dillman introduced this into survey research back in 1995. So it's used in communication with survey respondents. We have here an example how to verify and communicate visually the quality of a statistical business register, comparing, let's say, consistency among several variables. And then we have here an example of a visualization that supports analysis of missing values. On the left, the number of units with a missing value for each of the variables, and on the right, the frequencies of combinations of missing values. So we can use such visualizations already during data collection to be able to react, and once data collection in the field is completed, we can use this to support follow-up and editing procedures. Now, where else do we find visualization? It's an inherent part of big data processing, and in this example, we see the total number of vehicles per minute at one road location. So we have 60 points per hour times 24 hours, so altogether 1,440 points. Now, remember that pie chart of Turkish Empire that essentially presented two figures. So it's a completely different data density here. Now, how exactly your data dissemination will look like and what kind of visualization will support it depends on many things. I'm mentioning here just a few. First of all, what is the nature of data? Of course, you have to select an appropriate chart for a categorical variable or for a numerical variable, but other characteristics of a specific data set at hand are also important. The next big issue concerns what users you are communicating with. So, and for what purpose they will use official statistics. Will they use it for analysis, so discovering new insights, or for instant consumption, so taken as it is? And what medium will they be using? Are we speaking about printed version or electronic version? Will that electronic version be a static display, dynamic, interactive? Will it be on a computer screen or on a mobile line? Well, what we can say is that visualization is gaining importance in the world of official statistics, and we have many good examples, but we also have many examples that really fail to follow basic principles that we discussed today. And our guest made a great compilation of such examples and presented them at the NTTS conference in Brussels this March. And I invite you to have a look and try to, test if you can see the link between the basics that we covered today and his suggestion. And now I'm welcoming Georges Camões to connect with us.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Okay.
Thank you for inviting me. Hello all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. I have a very great pleasure to welcome you on board. And just to inform the participants that we'll go through a few examples now, and then we'll open the floor for questions. So if you have some questions, just bear with us a little bit, and then we'll give the chance to talk to the two of us. Okay. So we said we will be, or you will be talking mainly about color, how to use color in data visualization. So what would you say are general guidelines when it comes to the use of color?
Well, essentially, if you have no design skills, you want to remove aesthetics from the equation and keep color a functional dimension that we will see shortly. You can do that manipulating intensity and discriminability, and sometimes we don't need color at all, so we can play with gray, with a little color, so in always a functional perspective, not an aesthetics perspective, because usually non-designers tend to overuse color and not and the results are not pleasing. You mentioned Tufty. He says when using color, the basic need is to avoid catastrophe. So that shows how important it is to use color effectively.
Okay. Shall we move to examples?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Just a second. Yes. Okay, we have, I think that most of the examples, I don't know if all, but most are based on official statistics. I have to stress this. And we start with a very colorful pie chart.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. This is to show how not to use stimuli intensity. So we don't really need that splash of bright yellow. I see that more than I'd like to see, so we can avoid that. Also, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. And in some cases, like in pie charts, we don't really need color at all, because we can label each slice and use the same color for every one of them, and perhaps use color to emphasize something. We'll have an example later on.
Yes. Okay.
So this proves that we don't really need color for some charts like pie charts,
Yes.
and we can understand perfectly the pie.
Yes, it's actually very elegant pie chart. Okay, let's move to our next example. It's a line chart. Now, maybe I can say that it's showing the percentages, okay, the percentage of people aged 25 plus with a college degree for male and, well, men and women separately in time. It's the data from U.S. Census Bureau. Okay, what's the point that you are making here?
So this, as we saw in the first slide, we have several functional tasks of color. This is the first one, categorization, and it's just an example of that. Make sure colors are clearly different from and respect their symbolic meaning. And if they have a symbolic meaning in that context. For example, we could use pink and blue for male and female, or just avoid that symbolic meaning and use something else. I saw an example somewhere of inverted symbolic meaning, using pink for male, blue for female, and that was confusing. So if there is some meaning, some symbolic meaning, for example, when you use the logo for your institution to use in a chart, make sure you use it correctly and don't use the same color for, in this case, the competition or other organizations that can be confused.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good point. Okay, let's move to the next example. This is an example of a slope graph. Well, slope graphs are not really widely used in official statistics, and yes,
they should.
As it is presented here, it seems pretty cluttered. We have male, female, lots of countries, lots of colors, so it's very difficult to understand what we are seeing here. So what would be your suggestion?
This is a more generic message than specifically how to improve this chart. It deals with the editorial dimension of what we want to say, how we want to say it. And usually don't just add a lot of series to a chart and expect it to say something. We should specifically design the chart so that it conveys a message that's what we want to say. So this is emphasis. We don't have any emphasis here, but we have in the example on the right that emphasizes the Netherlands and the countries with a specific criteria for coincidence. All of them are from Eastern Europe. So we don't have to identify every single data point, every single line, just use color to emphasize at several levels, like the Netherlands that has a darker blue tone, and the group from Eastern countries and the other ones. So we can create several layers of reading using color to emphasize what we want people to see and emphasize the things that are less important but are useful as context.
Okay. So this is an idea that was not, let's say, present in official statistics, let's say, some time ago, because the data were given there and the user had to create a story. So, but now I think that official statisticians that know their data very well also started to present data with in a way with a story behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Or maybe we can use this case just to mention that maybe this could be the a candidate for small multiples.
It could, yes. It could.
So yeah, it would mean that we can stress one story in one display and another story in the next display and the third display and so on. But we would have to test that, of course, because there is really lots of data here. Okay. And now another chart that is also not usually part of official statistics toolbox, just to explain it a little bit. So we have on x-axis life expectancy at birth expressed in years, and we have healthy life expectancy expressed in years on y-axis. So in a way, it reminds us of a scatter plot, but it's much more than a simple scatter plot, isn't it?
Yes, it's a scatter plot where you connect male and female to see the variation between them. It's a complex chart. I wanted to put it here because it was complex. So also to say that we don't have to read a chart in a fraction of a second. Sometimes the chart requires a bit longer, but also gives us much more information than other ways of reading the data. So it doesn't matter if we spend too much time reading the data. What matters is how effective is the message and how relevant it is and how much we spend reading it. So this is an example of grouping, and I grouped Western Europe countries and Eastern Europe countries, and it clearly shows that the nature of the relationship is different between one group and the other one. The difference between male and female are a lot shorter in Western countries than in the Eastern countries. So we could see more details, explore them, but the idea is this is using color to create an immediate conclusion, and then we can explore. If we can, if we use color for every single country, probably we couldn't find that this basic relationship between the difference between European countries in Eastern and Western Europe.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. And now something, let's say, maybe more familiar.
Yeah.
A bar chart, or actually two bar charts, one for 1988 and one for 2010. Well, lots of bars. We have here, we have here household expenditure in categories like food and non-alcoholic beverages, alcohol, clothing, housing, furnishing, health, transport, and so on. So several categories of household expenditure over time, and then these cues are quintiles, so for expressing different levels of income. So lower income below and higher income on top. So is there any way to simplify this chart?
You saw in Cleveland's research that color is not a good way of showing exact variation between two data points, but it can show you that there is a sequence, and if there is a sequence, color should help seeing it. Each group displays quantiles 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it makes more sense to use variation of a single color than multiple colors. That's how this was simplified, because in the left example, that sequence destroys the multiple hues, multiple different colors, destroys that sequence that it is in the data.
Yeah, so ordering is possible. Decoding exact numbers is a different story.
Yes.
Okay. Here we have another variation of a bar chart. We have stacked bars. So again, we have frequency of being happy in the last 4 years, let's say for adult population, and we have all countries, and then always happy most of the time, sometimes, rarely, never. Okay, what's your advice here?
This is a scale, and a scale between never and always, with some neutral point in the middle. So this is similar to the one before, but with a diverging scale. So we should use two opposite colors and show how they spread from one pole to the next, from positive to negative.
Okay, yes, very good. And you use the same example to show one more thing?
Yes. Alarms. Alarms are very, very important. I show here Greece as an alarm in Greece because it's the only country with negative happiness, and I think we can use color because of its pop-up effect. So it calls our attention, and that's important. So we can use a small red dot or something to call attention of the reader to for a specific point. It means that alarms should be rare, not having a lot of yellow, green, red alarms, just a few that are important to, for some reason, the reader should pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very good. And now we really love color, but lack of color may also be nice and effective. I think that this is the idea here.
Yes, basically it's mixing. One side is missing, showing again that we can use gray only alone and use variations of gray to emphasize a few slices. So we live in a colored world, so we are expecting to have color. So we could play a bit with gray, with data for context, and color for data that we want to emphasize.
Yeah. Okay. And I have here your recommendation for support to get the tool for color management.
So I have two recommendations. First,
Okay.
if you use Excel, you should stop using the default color palette. First, so you should try the other ones. If you don't like them, if for some reason they are not helpful for your specific data, you should try to create a new one. Not you yourself, but unless you have the right design skills. But you can, for example, go to a site like Color Viewer and create and select one of those professionally designed palettes and import the data to create a new palette in Excel. So basically, you choose 6 classes and a quantitative scale, and in the middle you see RGB colors codes. So you just create a color palette with those RGB colors codes. So sorry.
Yeah. And
it's easy.
Yeah. And you can pay attention to something that we might not think about if we don't know it, that that there are actually, there's quite a large percentage of people that is colorblind and that they may have problems using your visualization. So this tool also supports you in this thing, or if you, let's say, for your internal purposes need to print it or photocopy it, it also gives you a hint what will be seen even in a black and white display.
If I don't have that reference here, but if you are creating charts for a larger audience where color blindness can be an issue, there is a very small application that you can put in memory of your computer called Color Oracle that creates a simulation of color blindness for your color palette. So you create a chart, activate that application, Color Oracle, and it shows how people suffering from color blindness would see that chart. Mm-hmm. So it can help.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. I think we have only 5 more minutes. So I'll now open the floor to participants. If you have any questions to ask. Yes, we see here your presentation, George, at NTTS was great, and I completely agree.
Thank you.
I really and I was thinking whether to use some of your examples, but I said it's a waste of time. Let's dig into the basics and then go with that one to with this knowledge to and check your presentation, your compilation. Yes. Okay. Could you please write the name of the color blindness simulator?
Let me check if I can find the link.
Okay. And you can just write it to send it to everyone. Okay, yeah, Heli, this was the one that we have in the slide, but it's the one also for showing how colorblind people see it. Well, actually, I think that most are men. It's about like 8 to 10%, as far as I know, of male population is colorblind. Yes, the presentation will be available after the webinar.
So it's colororacle.org.
So do you want me to type it or?
It's already, I added to the comments.
I don't see it. Did you send it to everyone? It's on the top or just to Heli?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was the default.
I'm sorry.
Never trust default.
Everyone, okay.
Okay, that is it. Okay. Well, I think we are now at the end. I will first thank Georges for all today's tips and insights. As I said before, I recommend again the NTTS presentation. Okay. We have a question. If area introduces bias, are maps a good visualization? Well, I don't think that maps are meant to suggest so much the area comparison. What would you say, Georges?
Well, there is a problem with maps. I'm sure you know those red seas of American counties for the last elections.
Yeah.
They express geography, not population.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
Oh, yeah. In that aspect, yes. Yes.
A second problem is that in many cases, you basically are mapping population distribution, and because many other series are related to population. So when you have, let's say, appointments with doctors, that's a function of population. So we have to make sure they are specific and are not only a variation of that basic distribution. But maps are complex, and they deserve several hours of discussion.
Yeah. So it depends how you look at it. We saw that Napoleon marched as an excellent example of a map, and we can find, of course, many maps that have many problems.
Yeah.
Okay. I will now conclude. I will just say that in case you have a comment, in case you have a question, do write to me or to Georges or both. And I'm also very interested in to learn how you know if, let's say, in your organizations, how your visualizations are achieving their purpose in practice. So if you have any information on that, I would invite you to share it with me. Okay. Thanks for participating, for responding in chat, and all the best with your visualization. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. I would also like, for my part, from Eurostat and from EMOS, thank our speakers, Mojca and Jorge, who did a wonderful job today, our participants, and I would take this opportunity to promote the next webinar, which will take place on the 31st of May, so in 2 weeks' time, just slightly earlier than usual. So that will be, instead of 4 o'clock, 4:30, it will be 14:30 in 2 weeks' time. I hope to see you, many of back then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.